We're live.
Hello.
Yay! So after
Sorry we're late for our own chat, but Google Plus was like, "Are you really sure that you want to hang out?" Yes, I am sure.
After many trials and tribulations, we have persevered and are ready to talk about Dark Triumph. Yay!
Yay!
So before we get into everything, hold on.
So before we get into everything, Misty was going to say something.
Yeah, sorry, and then my computer started speaking to me because I forgot to mute the other window. So sorry, I just probably zoned out there for a minute. Before we get into talking all that, we just want to remind you that you can follow along on the YouTube page or through Twitter with the hashtag WednesdayYA, or you can flip back and forth. Either way, we'll be keeping an eye on both. So feel free to chime in, join in at any point.
Yes, because if you were like me, you had a lot of emotions about this book.
I did, man. I really did.
Okay, I stayed up until 1 in the morning finishing this book. It was not good.
I pulled a couple of late nights with it because I tend to read late at night anyway. No, I definitely had some 1, 2, even I think later than that, o'clock in the morning type of reading binges with it.
Yeah, I got home after the late shift Monday, and I was like, I have to finish this. It's so good.
It was really good.
To say, I experienced the same thing with this one that I did with Grave Mercy, where it was really the last 100 pages where I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I love this so much.
I think I loved both of them all the way through.
I loved it all the way through, but in both cases, it really hit home for me when I got to the very end.
Yeah, I would say that's understandable.
So, Misty, out of how many stars out of 5 would you give this book?
5, easily.
Yeah, me too. Okay.
Oh, wait, before we get into it again, one more little disclaimer. This is a sequel, so if you haven't read Grave Mercy and you're afraid of spoilers, just be aware of that. Okay, continuing on.
And I plan on spoiling a lot of things for you.
All right, so...
Well, I'm sorry, there are just a lot of things to discuss.
Yes, there definitely are. And a lot of feels, I would say, to discuss. This was kind of a difficult book, honestly. It was a little, it was dark, and the first book was a little dark too, but this was even darker.
I have to say, even though it was incredibly dark, I came up with the most ridiculous reference to it. So we've probably, if you grew up in the 90s, seen the movie Cool Runnings, and there's this scene where one of the characters is giving another one a pep talk, and he's having him say this in the mirror, and he's like, "You're a badass mother who don't take no lip off of nobody."
And that's all you could think when you were reading this?
Yes, and that's what I was thinking about Sabella. I was like, she is a badass character.
She is a badass, absolutely. I was a little leery going into it. I really liked Ismay from the first book, and I was hesitant about Sabella because she was kind of a loose cannon, and I was wondering if maybe she was going to turn out to be a traitor. So I was kind of like, I don't know about this girl. And so when I found out the second book was from her POV, I was like, and she totally won me over, and I loved her. I want more of her story, and the fact that Aneth is going to be the third book is kind of like, well, no, I want more Sabella. But then again, I didn't want Sabella this time, I wanted Ismay, so obviously she'll win me over with Aneth, I think.
First of all, Sabella thinks you're a loose cannon.
And she'd be right.
She would be, it's true. Second of all, I was a little nervous going in too, weirdly because it was shorter. I guess I was like, but what if it doesn't fit in the same amount of awesome that Grave Mercy did? Because there were less pages, which doesn't make sense, but it's how I felt.
Well, I mean, you can look at it and think, well, maybe it's rushed, or maybe it was slapped together and she didn't intend to do a sequel, but they wanted a sequel. I can see there being some trepidation. If it's different, you're like, well, the first one was good, so I don't want different.
Yeah, but I think this was by far my favorite of the series so far. But it was fantastic. So
yeah, I have heard too from people that the third is a lot of people's favorites, so apparently it's going to just keep impressing, which is excellent.
I have to say, at first, in the beginning of the book, I wasn't totally on board with Sabella. I was like, you're very judgy, you're kind of mean. She doesn't really start off being the most likable character. And she just seems like so abrupt with everybody. Very abrupt, very directive. And, I was kind of like, But as you keep reading, you learn that she's got really good reasons for being the way that she is.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
So she grew on me.
I don't know that I always liked her, I think. I mean, in the first book, even when I kind of was wondering if she was a traitor, I still kind of liked her. So I don't think she needed to grow on me, but I loved her, I think, more than I was anticipating that I was going to love her.
That's a good way of putting it. I like that. Loved her more than you thought you were going to.
For some reason, it's not wanting to switch back and forth between us, so I'm having to do it manually. So if there's, like, weird lags where I'm just staring at things and you're like, what's going on? I'm sorry.
Misty is not just vain. It's actually Google+, if you believe it.
I mean, or I'm just vain. But I am really good at making excuses, so it turns out that it's Google+. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, so I'd say before we get into everything, let's check in with people on Twitter and YouTube.
I am not seeing anything on Twitter yet.
We do have some YouTubes. Lots of, like, excitement that we finally were able to start up. And Priscilla loves the trilogy, says she needs more books like these. And I would say absolutely agree with that one.
Yes, I was talking about this at work last night. I was like, have you read these books about assassin nuns? And someone else in the workroom said, what, assassin nuns? I need that in my life. I think I'm an assassin nun.
I mean, it really is a pretty genius hook. And I love that it always relates back to that and being, the handmaidens of death and being kind of vengeance-y and all that. Especially even once Sabella comes around at the end and is like, love is greater and all that. I love when she says that Ismay is the mercy and she's the justice, and she's still got that, like, harder edge to her. Yeah. Loved that.
So I wonder what Aneth is going to be then. What else do you need besides mercy and justice?
I don't know, but I think she's going to be... It might turn out that she's the loose cannon, because she's, like, wanting to bust out of there. I'm definitely curious to see. And she's going to have to, I think, take on the French, pretty much, because now that they've, killed off, or at least mostly incapacitated Dalbray, we don't see his death. We just see his almost death. All that's really left is the French are kind of closing in.
I was not happy, by the way, that she was like, oh, Dalbert's almost dead. I was like, can you not just, like, kill him completely dead? Come on.
Did you read the afterword, though, from the author? Because she based them on real-life characters, some of them, and Dalbray is one of them, and he lived to be into his 80s, but around the time that she has him be stabbed by Sabella, he kind of, like, drops out of the public eye. So I think she was kind of going for still tying it into the real life of maybe he's been incapacitated, but he's going to live out a very long life, a very miserable one when he's been half-gutted. So I found that kind of fascinating, but I'm thinking maybe he doesn't actually die yet.
So, I'm with you guys. Delayed reading Dark Triumph because I wanted more Ismay, but I loved it more by the end. So that seems to be the consensus.
Yeah. I don't know what... I loved Ismay. Here's what I think, and this is why it works so well for me, is that even though there's always more, and you're wanting more from these characters because you've grown to connect with them, and you know that you're going to get more because there's still a lot of peril, the Duchess hasn't been crowned, all that type of stuff. Each character's story feels complete, even though there is more going to be happening after this. It feels like a full story arc. So I really like that, even though you are left wanting more Ismay, wanting more Sabella, you don't necessarily feel like you're wanting more because you didn't get a nice finish to them. You do get that full, they come to the realizations and meet their father death and all of that, and they have a nice rounded character growth with room to still continue the story, and I appreciate that.
I think part of the reason that people also want more is because in both books, I feel like our couples are left with like the whole sense of like this is the start of something new, and you see them coming together, but you don't actually see them together very much. You don't really see them
Yeah.
established, and I think people are craving that like glimpse of like what are Ismay and Duval like, what are Beast and Sabella like.
Right. And you fall in love with their love, so you want to see them, them to get their happily ever after.
Which sounds so creepy, but it's true.
I mean, I'm nothing if not an excellent creeper.
That's true. I met Robin in November. She did an event at the Bethesda Library, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm not really sure what to do about swag for this series." And I was like, "Poison rings and keychain crossbows. Let's make this a thing."
I could totally get behind a keychain crossbow. I do actually have from ALA a few years ago, when Grave Mercy was coming out. They had pins that had like a little sort of stylized wolf on it, and it said, "Why be the sheep when you can be the wolf?" And then there were bookmarks that said "Vengeance." I don't remember the exact quote, the full quote. It's the tagline of the book, but the thing about vengeance is divine. I thought those were pretty damn good little bits of swag.
Tagline. Vengeance is divine.
Yeah, exactly.
At least on this one.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you guys have theories, so we've got Mercy and Justice. If anyone has a theory about what the third thing is, let us know. Don't spoil it. If you genuinely
if you've read it.
have a theory, if you just know, don't tell us because we don't want to. I don't want to
And
be spoiled.
how many of you, I'm curious, how many of you out there have already read the third book? Because it hasn't been out that long.
Yes,
So,
please tell us. Tell us
yeah.
how long, when you read the third book, how it was, all that good stuff.
And does Aneth end up winning you over?
By the way, I made it through the entire book without visualizing the French mustachioed man from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And as soon as you said French in this hangout, that was the first thing that popped into my head, and I wasn't able to take the character seriously anymore.
Well, we were almost able to be proud of you, but then you resorted to Liz, so we're just going to let it slide.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
It happens to the best of us. We all have our weird associations. As long as there's no mustache twirling.
Oh, Emily of O Magic Hour says, the Justice Mercy thing made me think of a biblical reference. Humility is the third prong.
Interesting. And I mean, there certainly is that strand of religion running through it, especially when each gets to meet their father who is a god and has that, like, peace come over them and they just understand their purpose. So, interesting.
Yeah, how did we feel about the scene where she meets death? Did we like that? I was a fan of it personally.
I was a fan of it because it helps her kind of really understand herself and her purpose, but also because it still serves to show how different she is from Ismay. So Ismay, it was like this sort of peaceful moment, and for her, she gets to the peaceful moment, but first she does lash out, and she has to let him know that she feels betrayed and she feels abandoned, and I like that she doesn't just
give him a free pass.
Lose who she is in that moment. She's still Sabella, and she's going to make it known, but she still gets to have that peace and that understanding, I guess, from the meeting.
Julie says, "Mwahahaha! I love Aneth. Hashtag no spoilers. Hashtag it's amazing."
So in other words, we need to read it ASAP, is what she's saying.
So how soon until we get to talk about Beast?
We can talk about Beast all day because I've loved him from the first book, and I was very pleased to see that his role was stepped up in this book. But go ahead, Liz. What would you like to talk about?
Well, first of all, I felt bad that they kept describing him as so ugly. I mean, part of me believes it, and part of me is like, come on, he can't be like that bad. Like, give him some credit. I'm sure he's got his looks. But he just had so many ridiculously romantic lines. Like, you wrote to really like the idea of him because he's just like, no, like, I will not let you come in harm's way. And, not in like a totally mansplaining way, but in a, I love you way. And then he just has these terribly romantic lines. I bookmarked a few things. So I'll let Misty share her thoughts while I look for those.
Okay, since you mentioned the looks thing, I love that Beast is ugly. I love that she doesn't go the stereotypical, like, dreamy, swoony alpha male thing. He should be pretty beaten up, first of all. He's this berserker, basically. He has battle lust come over him, and he's going to be scarred up and banged up. But also, I just like that not every character in a book has to be beautiful and transcendent. Like, I like that there's some more realness through that, and that I like when authors don't feel like they have to make a character amazing, gorgeous, perfect all the time in every category. That adds to the authenticity for me, and I just appreciate it as a choice.
Here's the line that I really liked. It's when they're talking about, getting it on, and he says, "I want you to be with me for the right reasons, not because you feel you must or because you fear we will die, but because you want it with your heart and your body." I mean, come on. I just think that that's very romantic and passionate and kind of exactly what you should say in that situation. 2 thumbs up, Beast.
I feel like I bookmarked that passage too, but only for her response, but now I can't find it.
I
But yes, I appreciated that as well.
Her response is... Now I wish I hadn't shut the book right after I read that.
It's okay. You don't have to dig it up. There were a lot of things, a lot of instances in their interactions where I did tend to tap things.
Before she starts to talk about blessed rightness unfurling inside her, yeah. I don't know. I guess I wasn't really struck by her reaction in that case, but she was very guarded, it's true.
I don't know if it was necessarily that little bit. There was just something in that. It might have been before he said that, but there was something in there that I remember either tabbing or meaning to tab. Anyway, we can move on from there.
Emily says she hasn't read book 3 yet, but she is waiting to savor it. Missy, what does the YouTube say?
Priscilla has read book 3. She said it was slow in the beginning, but the one big thing she guessed, and then there's a lot more about the mythology and religion, and that it was great.
Julie says when she goes to him right near the end and tells him she loves him, I just swoon. I understand that. Which, by the way, how did we feel about all of the plot twists surrounding Sabella's backstory? Because she had a lot of them.
She did. And you knew pretty much from the moment she entered Grave Mercy that she was going to have a pretty sordid and awful background. I mean, that's hinted at pretty thickly, I'd say, in the beginning. I don't know that we could have understood the depth of the horror of it, though. But I do like... I'm going to let you talk about your kind of thoughts on it first before I get into this, but I really liked how Robin was very good at having the black and white and having things be very, like, this is wrong, but then also working in some gray area, and I appreciate that. But I'm going to let you talk about your opinion first.
You know, I thought it was very well done. There was... The thing that I want to especially talk about is Dalbert and how he kills her baby when she has one.
Yeah.
And when I first read that passage, I was like, seriously? Who kills a baby? But then I was like, you know what? Dalbert isn't supposed to be a normal character. I mean, I think that if we judged him according to today's standards, he would be considered a sociopath. And I mean, clearly the people in his world thought that he was kind of unhinged, but I mean, if you looked at if a character like him existed in something that was set in today's world, it would be like, you know, this is someone who has like a mental illness or just like really needs help, you know. And so I thought that that actually did end up working, even though it gave me a moment of pause when it first happened. That was that. And I also thought the storyline with the brother was really well done. Again, I liked how she kind of had mixed feelings about it, even though she knew that it was wrong, but it was also like she still felt some kind of obligation and attachment to her brother.
And that was what I liked about it, not from her perspective, because that was understandable, but I liked that in the end, right before Julian dies, Robin, brings it back around to Sabella understanding that it wasn't about control and that Julian wasn't playing little cat and mouse games with her, that he really did care. In the same way that she was kind of protected by him and he was her lifeline as a kid, he still feels that about her. And though he's totally terribly misguided and pretty wrong in how he approaches that, he's grown up in this horrible situation too. And so for him, she is his escape, and he doesn't necessarily realize how wrong he's being. And so I liked that there was that sort of gray area in the end, and some potential for forgiveness, for Sabella to practice forgiveness and understanding, even though she's been subjected to all this horror. I liked that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think family relations would have been considered mildly more acceptable for that historical period, but with that degree of closeness, still kind of.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. I think it's still. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have been put to death for it, actually. So, I mean, I think because you're living in much more insular worlds, you can get away with things, but it has to be very, very hush-hush, or you'd be excommunicated and possibly put to death. As for Delbray killing the baby, I fully expected that of him. I thought that was very in keeping with his character and also with the time. Bastard children, poor children. It wasn't necessarily that shocking, I think, to kill off any potential. I mean, he would have been the first, or I guess it was a girl that she had, but it would have been a potential heir that he didn't want. And
that's why he killed it. Was because it wasn't a male. He was like, "You didn't produce me a male heir," and then killed it.
Well, I think it was because if it had been Julian's, he would have kept it, because it was the blacksmiths, and that was sort of a tainted lineage. That wasn't okay with him. What I found more despicable, but also still not shocking, was that when she reveals her parentage, he decides he's going to breed her, either with himself or with Julian, if Julian will still have her. I found that much more despicable than the baby killing, which was bad, definitely, absolutely, but he just makes your skin crawl. Like, there's no line for him that he's ever going to feel he's crossed. It's whatever will make him most powerful, he's fine with.
Yeah, he was really messed up. Yeah. And, another thing that I thought, I already cared, but Robin did an even better job in this book. I was really impressed by how much she made me care about the Duchess, because if you think about it, book 1 was like 500 pages. Here's another 400. So it's been like 900 pages, and the Duchess really hasn't had that much screen time.
Right.
So you care so much about her and, about Brittany maintaining its independence. I was really impressed by how much she did with that.
Yeah, you root for her, and you really don't want to see her unseated, and you don't want to see any harm come to her. She does do really well with that. And I think, too, we talked last time with Grave Mercy about the ages being a little, iffy, and knowing that it was based on historical characters, now I understand the ages that she chose more, because before it was like the Duchess is 12, that she doesn't seem like a 12-year-old. But I didn't have as much of a problem with it this time, maybe because I've adjusted to that. But yeah, I don't know, she makes it work. Even, I still kind of, part of me wishes that it was just adult historical fantasy and not necessarily YA. And I think it maybe would even be more suited to that. But yeah, she does make it work. Even with anything that you can kind of throw at it or pick it apart with, questions and things, she stays on top of it. She gives you reason to keep going with it.
I find it interesting that you think that it would be better suited to adult. Why do you think that?
Well, this one especially, because it is so dark. She still is willing to go there, but I think you are a lot more constricted in some of the things that you're able to do with YA, and there are times that I can almost sort of picture both the violence and the sexuality of it being really, really well played out, and the courtly intrigue and all that, in an adult historical fantasy, whereas in YA, I think you're kind of a little more restrained, and it tends to have to focus a little bit more on the happy ending and the romance than some of the harsh realities. Though she definitely doesn't shy away from them, I just think it would probably be more suited to an adult book, an adult venue, if that makes sense.
You have to kind of wonder in this case what it is that she was, what it was that was really driving her when she was writing. Because I mean, obviously, the history is fascinating, and looking at her like outlines, that was obviously a huge driving thing. But I think part of what makes it YA is the desire to write the character arcs the way that she does. Because I think for Ismay and Sabella, these are both really coming of age stories. They're really
Yes.
discovering their purpose in the world. So I think they end up being YA because she wants. I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. I'm guessing she probably wanted to write those more coming of age stories.
That's true. And those probably wouldn't work as well if they were in an adult sort of oriented book. You'd probably have them at a much later age when they'd been out in the world assassinating for longer. So yeah, that's true. From that standpoint, it definitely works better as YA.
I mean, the other thing is that just about every aspect of this book is political. I mean, everything with Dalbray is obviously political, with her brother, with the Charbonnerie, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation. And, I wonder if she was maybe more interested in the political than the sexual, and so she was just like, YA readers are going to be more into that, because there is a lot of YA out there that goes very heavy into the politics.
There is, and I think for this genre, for anything that's kind of court-based historical, it's always going to go heavy politics, which is what I tend to like about them. I like the court politics and the intrigue, and she does that very well. Priscilla asks about the timeline and it being about the same time as the Borgias, and yes, it was. And something I wanted to mention about that, another thing that she says in her little afterword, was that this is also the same time period as a few incidents that informed the Bluebeard myth, the fairy tale where the man kills his wives, and obviously we can see that in this story, and I find it interesting that she kind of used Dalbray as the form for that, and that Bluebeard tale and that sort of power that men had that was limitless over women. I mean, women were the property. He was able to get away with all of this, and no one was going to stop him, and I like that she kind of takes that on and makes Sabella a champion for women, and her father makes the, I can't remember her father's name, but the god of death, makes him sort of a champion and says that he's going to help these women find their vengeance, and that Dalbray is going to be locked out of, any kind of ever after. I appreciated that. As a fairy tale lover, obviously, I liked that.
Yeah, I do really hope that the teenage girls reading these books appreciate that they are such feminist works, because they really, really are. And I've heard that the third book is especially so. So I'm really looking forward to picking that up and, getting into that.
Yeah, I love that she's able to give it a feminist slant and explore that and explore these girls sort of taking their power, coming into their power, and still making it believable, because sometimes you'll get historical books that are written by authors now that make their characters too modern and too not believably feminist, and they try to write it through the lens of someone now, and it ends up falling flat because it doesn't work with the time period. She still shows all the horror and all of the things that a lot of people would rail against, but is able to use it as a really grim lens of this is accurate, this is what life would have been, but still giving these girls agency. They choose, in both books, to willingly have sex with these people that they like. They go where they want, basically. They're trained assassins. They're more powerful than these men around them. I really like that she puts that in there in a way that actually works and doesn't seem like it's a feminist, modern slant forced on historical characters and world.
That's a good point. The moments that I think for me really, I thought it was very simple, but the moments wherever Ismay and Sabella were together and kind of having a moment of like discussing something were always moments when I felt like we were very much in their time period and in their world. I don't know, I think it was just like the topics and the tone of their conversation just made it feel like it really fit that time period. And
the ways they related to each other.
Yes.
That's another thing I really like too, is that they, I love their relationship with each other, and I love that they, look out for each other, and that Sabella kind of shows a little bit of a softer side, even though she tries so hard not to. I love that there's sort of sisterly thing, and that they look out for each other, look out for other women, and the girls, the Duchess, and the younger sisters, and Sabella's sisters. I like that there is that sort of focus in it, and just a little bit of like a bonding thing. I really liked that. I thought it was sweet.
Yeah, and I like how Sabella's sisters, weren't just her sisters. They were really useful to the story as well. They were really
Yeah.
to it. It's not just like, here are some side characters that I'm going to mention and forget about. It was, here are two side characters who are going to become critical to the plot and make the love interest thing way more complicated.
Yeah.
So it was nice to see. I think sometimes characters can get put in that way and kind of forgotten about. People will just be, they'll just kind of drop off, but that was definitely not an issue here.
Or they become too predictable of pawns, which could have easily happened in this. I mean, they are kind of literally used as pawns at one point, but there's still depth to them, and there's still an idea that there's something more going on. They're not just these sort of cardboard inserts that up the ante, but there's actually connection there.
Yes, that's very true.
I think we talked about it last time, and I have a feeling that you're probably going to have strong opinions, but let's talk for a moment about the Abbess, because she's a piece of work, I think.
Before that, I want to get on to one question from Twitter.
Okay.
Julie asked, did Robin mention anything she may be working on in the future, Liz? All these powerful family men around the same time. I got this. I don't believe she did. She might have said if she was working on anything, she couldn't talk about it. I got the sense that she maybe got a little bit of burnout after writing Mortal Heart, and that she was just kind of recharging. I hope that eventually we'll see something again from her soon. And given the popularity of this series, I would assume we would see more, but we'll see.
Hopefully. And before we get onto the Abbess once again, Friday Ketchup says that the book passes the Bechdel test with flying colors, and yes, it does. Amen. I'm definitely pleased with that. And again, with the sort of little bit of feminism worked in there, it's not flat and it's not typical and predictable. It's just really well done. She builds all of the characters. It doesn't matter if they're man or woman. It doesn't matter if they're young or old. She really does give them depth, and you know that there's a backstory even if you don't see the backstory.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Abbess.
Piece of work.
It's a bit of a saucy minx.
You had mentioned feeling like Delbray was probably a sociopath. I kind of get the feeling that the Abbess is a little bit of a sociopath, honestly. I think that she is very self-important and manipulative, and I think she's just as power-hungry, but in a different way. She's not necessarily trying to conquer nations, but I think she wants to wield all of the cards.
Oh, she likes to curry favor with the people in court, and she definitely wants to have control over these younger women.
Yeah.
I didn't really get the sociopath from her. I just got more of, like, this whole, like, uppity, I am older, I am wiser, I know what's best attitude. And so, yeah, I don't know. I definitely didn't like her. And I'm going to be curious to see how things play out, especially with the Seeress and Ameth in the third book.
Yeah.
Because we really haven't talked about the Seeress a whole lot. And I feel like there's probably a lot more going on there than has been let on. Like in this book, they're just kind of like, oh, the Seeress is sick. Ameth might never get to leave the convent. And I just want to know what else is going on with that situation.
I feel like there are a lot of secrets in the convent, and in the whole structure of everything. Beyond just not liking her, she's actively malicious. The way she treats Sabella, and I'm not sure why she is so anti-Sabella, but not only sending her back into that household, but then wanting to send her again at the end, and acting very dismissive of, well, you'll die, but so what? She's just, ugh.
I think actually the reason that she and Sabella don't get along are because they're actually very similar. They're both very determined, very like, this is what's right, very directive, very strong, And I think it's just one of those things where they just butt heads, you know? Like, I mean, yes, it's partially that the Abbess doesn't, Abbess, blah, blah, what? Partially that she doesn't have a lot of regard for Sabella's personal safety, but it's also that, you know, they're just similar. And I did like the point that the Abbess was probably jealous of Ismay being like, well, you saw Mortain, why haven't I seen him?
Yeah. I feel like it's not just that she is not caring of Sabella's personal safety, because yes, they are assassins and they are going into these very dangerous situations, and of course they know there's a risk to their lives. She actively is putting her in very awful situations, and I feel like it's targeted. I think there's something there. There's some reason that she has something against Sabella. That's how I feel. Priscilla says that there is a lot about the Abbess in the third book, so I'm very curious to find out more about the Abbess and the convent, and since Aneth is actually there, I would say we definitely would.
Dear convent, I want to learn all of your secrets.
I would like to see more about the other ones, too. We get Sabella kind of talking a lot more about the other gods and how she was sort of a follower of Saint Mare when she was a child, and different little things like that, and they all have their, you see snippets of their backstories and their religions and the things that they stand for, and I think this could be a really, not that she necessarily will write more books set in this world, but I think there's potential there to have sort of side stories and standalones that expand on that, and I would like to see that.
Oh, there's always the potential for spin-offs.
Absolutely. But there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah.
All right, so how are things coming on Twitter, Liz?
Twitter is pretty quiet.
Oh, I missed this, but Priscilla said that Robin hinted about another series more focused on Anne and her life after the trilogy, and then asks what we think about this. Now, since I haven't actually read the third book, I don't know what I think about this, but I would definitely want more. I can say that.
I am interested in the idea. I would read that. I am not sure what happens in history once the trilogy ends. I'm not a big history buff, at least not in terms of this particular era, but I'm sure Robin would make it fascinating.
I don't think she would have to try too hard sticking with this sort of timeline, because that was the height of court intrigue and backstabbing and poisoning and all that. So lots of media has come about this era in time, so she could certainly exploit that for a long time to come.
By the way, there were a couple points in Grave Mercy where I maybe got a little confused by the court intrigue, and for some reason that never happened to me in Dark Triumph. Not that I'm complaining. I was just kind of surprised that I didn't experience it at all with this one. I was just like vacuumed into the story right away.
And I think that that's probably not surprising. Not to keep talking about the afterword, I think by this point I'll have just read the entire thing to you, but she actually talks about that in the afterword, that the first book is more court intrigue, and the second book is much more a more personal story, a more family story. So in the first one we have Ismay going into the Breton court and trying to ferret out who's a traitor and stuff like that, and so it's a much more expansive story. Whereas as with the second one, it's really a family story.
Yeah, she mentions the historical and political backdrop. It was 1 a.m. by the time I read this author's notes. I could have read it again right before the chat, but this is how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, it's okay. Most people don't read the author's note at all, so it happens.
And they're often really important. Read the author's note, guys.
Well, and it's nice, too, to see she, especially in this one, you can tell how much this was a labor of love. She talks about the things that keep her up at night, all the little, little things that you focus on.
And it's so true, because I have a friend who's working on a children's nonfiction books, and she will sit and talk for hours about copy editing and what should be capitalized and what shouldn't. And I'm just like, how have you devoted? It's one of those things where I could totally see myself devoting that much thought to it if I was doing it. So.
Yeah, you obsess. I mean, right down to the little things of, do I want this word or this word? And you read them back and forth, and you keep changing it. And like, well, do I like it this way or do I like it this way? Where
Well,
no one else is going to notice that and be like, hey, I don't think she could have chosen a more perfect word right there. You really do, I think.
signing. He even said, like, sometimes when I'm reading something aloud, I'll just, like, change a word. My problem is that I never want to stop editing.
Yeah.
Julie says that she would also be very excited for a book about Anne, so maybe this will happen. We will see. Well, I don't know, but she said it would be amazing. Here's hoping.
Yeah.
I think after this, I'm pretty much guaranteed to read anything that Robin has written.
I would say so too. And I'm curious, I know that she writes under multiple pen names. Has anyone ever read anything by any of her other ones? I know she writes under R.L. Lefevre's and I think a few others as well. I have no idea if they're at all similar to this in tone or style, but there is more out there for us to read beyond just this trilogy. It's just not necessarily going to be like this.
I think the stuff under R.L. Fervers is actually middle grade, which is kind of hard to imagine.
Yeah, a little bit.
She can have it at work. If anything, you would think that she would be writing adult historical fiction under a pen name, but
yeah, or romances or something, totally different. Because a lot of times when people switch to a pen name, they're doing something so completely different that they don't want fans of the one thing to stumble upon the other and be like, well, wait, this is not at all what I was looking for. So
that's curious. That's not just an individual author thing. That's a publishing house thing.
Very much so. And it's sometimes to get around contracts, because if you are locked into a contract under this name for these things, but you want to write this other story, then you write it under a pen name, which is what we're seeing with some of the V.E. Schwab stuff.
Yeah, and that's why in Gilmore Girls, Lorelai gets a catalog first. People know that's.
That is a perfect reference, and you get 10 points for that. Anytime anyone pulls in the Gilmore Girls references, you're going to win points with me.
I feel like I should get extra for Squeegee Beckenheim. Come on.
I said not that long ago that if anyone says "Oi with the poodles already" or "Copper Boom," like, you're an instant friend.
It's true.
All right, so we're getting a little towards the end. Is there anything specific anyone wanted to talk about or mention? I'm trying to think. Everything was just love for me, so I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to talk about.
I always like to
talk about.
We should both hold up our covers. This is the hardcover. She's holding the dagger over her shoulder. And then in that one, she is wearing the cross. Misty is the paperback, which I got for her. And
yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this cover. I don't hate it, but two things. The cross was a belt, so it's not supposed to be right there. And her hair, I don't know if you can see it, but it looks like bad Photoshop or a bad wig. It just bothers me. I don't know. It's a little like Chris Angel, the magician. It's not, I don't.
I don't, but it's a weird visual.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, and the cross is in the right place on this one, but it's kind of covered up by the lettering, so I think that's why they moved it. It's like right down to the A. I know this is a weird thing to obsess over, but
no, definitely not at all. I mean, you notice these things. Like, I understand, and they wanted to make sure they had the cross in there as a visual. It's something she mentions a lot. And I mean, I guess she does have one down here on her belt, so maybe it's a different cross. I don't know. It's just a little weird.
You're a nun. You got
it, but it's weird. Cross. She's especially religious.
Yeah.
She's a very pious gal, Arcibella.
True story. At least when I come to more tame.
Back to Gilmore Girls. Not that we're going to spend the rest of this talking about Gilmore Girls, but we got a comment from Winter Winters that says there were only 5 seasons of Gilmore Girls. Amy Sherman Palladino was not involved in 6 or 7, so apparently we're going to write off those last 2. I think she was involved in 6, though, but maybe not the entire time, but definitely not 7. And I really want to know what her last lines were, because I don't think we're ever going to find those out. Not only because I don't think there will ever be a Gilmore Girls movie, but because in an interview she said that things have changed so much that she doesn't think that last line it won't have the same sort of impact anymore, but she won't tell anyone. If you don't know what I'm talking about, she said from the first moment she wrote the first lines of the series, she knew exactly how it was going to end and what the last lines would be, but she would never tell anyone. I really want to know what they were. But anyway, back
Boy,
to
with the poodles already. That was probably it.
Priscilla says that she loved the Outcasts, the Charbonnerie. Yes, I did too, and I love that they pulled them in.
They were fantastic.
Yes, I really liked them, actually. Do we see more of them in the third book? I want to know that. Whoever's read it.
Don't ruin it for us. Don't listen to Misty. She doesn't really want spoilers.
Never listen to me about anything. I mean, that's where you go wrong.
I liked that there was a little bit of gray area with them, too, and with, like, the young boys joining the troops, from the farmhouse. That was excellent as well.
I liked how many sort of stand-up characters there were in this that were little side characters. Like Sabella talks, when she meets with the Duchess, she talks about how most of the people who died were little nobodies, basically. It was like serving people in the castle who refused to denounce the Duchess. And then you have people like Yannick, who is guarding after Beast and, would give his life. And you've got just all these little people peppered throughout, like Sabella's nurse, I don't remember her name, the one that cuts her down after she tried to hang herself, and the one that, is helping her now. I like that there are all these little side characters, little people that would be overlooked by someone as self-important as Dalbray, that are really, really heroic, actually, in ways that don't go unnoticed. I like that.
Helps them sneak over to get into the castle in the first place.
Yeah.
At the very end.
Yeah, there was a lot of that peppered throughout, and I really liked that.
No wasted characters in this one. There's nobody in the background muttering peas and carrots, peas and carrots, peas and carrots. Every character is utilized to their fullest potential.
Yes, and I know I already said it, but you really do feel like there is more to the story for all of them. I really like when it feels like people aren't just extras; they're not just inserts, but they really do have a place in everything. Even if you're never going to get to explore it, you feel like there's something there, and I appreciate that because it means that work did go into it. She understands their background, even if we're not going to get to. That's dedication.
Robin could totally be the Oprah of standalone spin-offs. And you get a spin-off, and you get a spin-off, and you get a spin-off.
I would fully support that. Priscilla says we get to see more of the world she created in general in the third book, and then begs us to read it. Read the third book, guys. I intend to. I fully intend to. You don't have to convince me.
Excellent. Whether we'll read it together yet has not been determined, so who knows?
I mean, I think that we'll probably have to at this point. We've read both the first two books.
True.
As part of Wednesday Way, I think we've got to just go ahead and make it complete.
That's true. I'm going to have to resist the urge to read it before then.
Yeah, I know. We've got to just restrain. We'll save it probably for the end of this year or something. Fall or something. They'll be nicely paced out, I think, by then. Or sooner. Who knows?
We are addicted.
A little bit. Oh, she says that we find out more about the marks in the third book, and why Sabella sees them in the forehead and others don't see them at all. Just stop with the teasers, Priscilla. We're going to read them, I promise. But yes, thank you for them, because it really does make me want to read it. These, especially because I had talked about, I know a lot of people love big fat books, and when I was a kid I did. I've become much less patient, and now when I see a big fat book, I normally look at it and think, there's a lot in you that I'm going to want to cut. Like, I'm going to itch for a red pen because I'm going to want to just start crossing things out and saying, this wasn't necessary, could have cut this, doesn't need to be a doorstop. But I didn't feel that way at all with Grave Mercy. And this one's almost 400 pages, so this one's fairly lengthy. Nothing feels like filler. It doesn't feel like wasted space. And it's not ever slow. Like, I flew through these, so I like them, and I don't need to be convinced to read them.
Like, excuse me while I read this in pretty much 2-3 sittings.
Yeah. Late night sittings. Like, I can't tell you how many times when I first picked it up, I kept saying, okay, I am going to go to bed after this chapter. I'm going to read one more page. And then like 20 pages later, I'd be like, no, okay, I got to go to bed. And I did that for like 2 hours one night. It was so late by the time I went to bed. I mean, I seriously think it was about 3:30. It was bad, but it was so good.
I'm surprised your first thought when you see a chunker is not, I like big books and I cannot lie. But
yeah, I love the song. It's just not true for me. I have a lot of big fat books, and there are some that I absolutely love, but I'm always hesitant to start them because I never know how much of them I'm going to like and how much I'm going to be like, oh.
Whenever I start them, I'm just like, what is being sacrificed by my reading?
Yes, exactly. Like, if you're 2 or 3 times a normal book length, I could have read 2 or 3 of you. So that just gets a little... You have to really make me love you to keep me interested in you that long. I'm fickle.
Okay, so do we have any final thoughts on Dark Triumph?
Just never-ending love for me. And just the seriousness and the sadness of it, I don't know, I was just really... even though people were saying in the last chat during Grave Mercy that they felt like Book 2 was even better, I didn't think that I was going to agree because I really loved Grave Mercy. I thought, yeah, I'm sure it'll be good, but I wasn't expecting it to kind of make me love it so much. But I think it might have actually beat out Grave Mercy in my estimation just because it does go to such dark places and still end on a high point. And because she doesn't shy away, and it's just... It was actually physically painful for me to read in the beginning. It was really, like, bothering me in the beginning, and still was able to make me love it and feel so much for Sabella, and I think I appreciate it even more than I did Grave Mercy, which also had its own dark streak and its own painful moments, but this was nonstop painful in the beginning, but still came out, like, on a high.
Sure.
Alrighty, so... I don't know if there are any last questions or comments from Twitter that you want to add in, but if not, I'll go ahead and announce the March pick.
I wish I had it to hold up, but I think it's in a basement somewhere.
It's okay because I have it. All right, so last year, Liz and I had decided that during our birthday month, we would get to choose the book with no input from anyone else, just whatever we were wanting to read, which is always a dangerous... proposition when it comes to me because I can be very indecisive and will just go through like a list of 20 books like, well, I want to read this, but I want to read this, which is what I did this time because March is my birthday month. But I was able to finally choose one and let Liz know about an hour before we started the chat tonight. I was in the mood for something quirky, so I pulled out about a dozen books off my shelves today and kind of read the first little bit to see which one was pulling me in the most, and I ended up going with The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett. Now, this is a bind-up. This actually has 2 books in it, We Free Men and Head of Sky. We're only reading the first one. This is part of the Discworld series, but to my understanding, they all are standalone, so even though this is like number 31 or something of Discworld, you can still pick it up at this point. But even so, this is kind of separate within the Discworld series because it's kind of its own little cycle and is the more YA segment of the Discworld series, if I'm making any sense at all. But I've been wanting to read these forever, and I started reading it today and didn't want to put it down. So this is what we're going with. Hope you guys are approving of that. I'm really excited for it.
I'm excited too. I hope I can eventually find my copy.
I hope so too, because otherwise it might be problematic when we go to discuss it. Just maybe.
I'll get a copy from work. I think it's in my parents' basement, so.
At least you do have easy access to things at work. That's one of the perks, I'd say.
Yes, very true.
That and getting to don silly clothing to do children's programs, that's another perk, in my opinion.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Oh, we have someone that's very excited about We Free Men in the Tiffany Aching series. Yay! I have been wanting to read this for ages.
We're just reading half the bind-up?
Yeah, because, I mean, they are 2 separate books, so that way someone doesn't need to track down both if they don't have the bind-up, and we can always read the other one later. I figured that works.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So that is the plan. We'll announce it officially and all that jazz on our blogs next Wednesday. And of course, the last Wednesday of the month, we'll be doing our live show to discuss it. That time it will be on Liz's channel, so you'll want to subscribe to Consumed by Books if you're not already. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter as well.
Sort it out. The last Wednesday of the month, for those of you wondering, it looks like it's going to be the 25th, I believe.
Yeah, so exactly 4 weeks from today, because that's what February does to us.
February is weird.
February is weird.
February's been a saucy minx. I'm ready for it to be done now. We've had
There are a lot of saucy minxes in this discussion. And yes, February has been ridiculous. I have a 7.5-foot snowman in my backyard right now. So thank you, February and Mother Nature and Michigan.
Yay. Okay, so that's kind of all that we have for you guys tonight. Thank you very much for joining us and watching.
Thank you for tweeting along and being enthusiastic and rubbing it in our faces if you've read book 3. All right, I think that's it for us. So any last words to say? Otherwise, we'll sign off now.
Bye. See you again.
Bye.